We are starting. I'm not sure if is it working? Okay. Okay. Can I please request colleagues on the other side of this wall to please just reduce the level, the decibels of noise. Thank you very much. Welcome to the session on the role of local authorities in climate proofing of the built environment. That's the session we're going to have today, or at this time. My name is Mtobeli Kolisa. I'm from the South African Local Government Association. I would like to truly thank you for making time to join us in this session. And I would like to take this opportunity to particularly appreciate the presence of our Deputy Minister for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in South Africa, Deputy Minister Pakstow. Thank you very much. I will introduce later on the panelists who are going to be making inputs in this session. Just briefly to describe the session that we are going to have today. In terms of the title, we are going to explore three elements and how they interact in the context of a local authority. The first one is the built environment. By it, we are referring to human-made structures, features, facilities, viewed all collectively as an environment in which people live and work, essentially as an environment in which socio-economic development or socio-economic activity takes place. The second element that we're going to explore, and its interplay with the other two, is climate proofing. By it, we are referring to the practice of one, reducing greenhouse gas emissions released in the implementation of investment and development initiatives towards the built environment. Second part of it is increasing the resilience of these structures, of these features, of these facilities towards climate change. The third element that is going to form part of this discussion, if somebody may help me with people next door. The third element that is going to be part of this discussion is the local authorities. Here we are referring to the sphere of government that is closest to the communities and the people that are impacted and are impacting on the built environment. This tends to be the sphere of government that tends to be in the lowest in the hierarchy of power and resources in the structure of government. But it is highest in the hierarchy of proximity and direct interaction with people and communities that are impacted and impact on the environment. So in this session, we're going to explore the interaction between these three elements that I talked about, using experiences of practitioners and leaders in the local government sector. I would like to take this opportunity firstly to thank NBI and the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment in South Africa for the opportunity to host this session in this pavilion. We really appreciate this opportunity. We have 4 panelists that are going to make inputs in this discussion. The first one who we are going to start with is Councillor Xola Phakathi. Councillor Xola Phakathi is the Deputy President of the South African Local Government Association. When we get to him, he is going to give remarks that will set the scene for the discussion that we're going to have. The second panelist who is going to make inputs is Honorable Andreas Volter, who is the mayor of Cologne city in Germany. I'm going to talk about the input that is going to have when we get to him. The fourth panelist, who is going to make inputs is Ms. Tumisa Tengwa, who is the Deputy Head of Biodiversity Protection and Ecosystems Restoration in one of the cities of South Africa, which is eThekwini Metropolitan Municipality. And lastly, we are going to have Mr. Ryan Roberts. Ryan is a senior specialist for climate finance within ICLEI. He's a specialist for climate finance in the Sustainable Finance Center of ICLEI. The way we are going to run this session is that I'm going to give our panelists, firstly, 10 minutes each to make the inputs. If they take less than 10 minutes, I'll really be grateful. We're starting a bit late. Once they have done so, we'll then allow for a discussion. Everyone in the room may participate in that discussion. And then I will then give my panelists again, not more than 4 minutes at the end to wrap up, informed by the discussion that would have taken place. And then I'll close the session. So it's quite a very short session in that sense. Now I want to then give an opportunity to Councillor Phakathi to just set the scene for the discussion that we're going to have on the three elements as I've outlined. Councillor Phakathi.
Thank you, Chairperson, for this opportunity. Let me start by greeting the Honorable Deputy Minister of the Department of Cooperative Governance, Honorable Tau, fellow panelists, the Mayor of Cologne in Germany. We are honored to have you share with us your experience in this session. Ms. Tumisa Tengwa, who is the Deputy Head for Biodiversity Protection and Ecosystem Restoration at eThekwini Municipality, and Ryan Roberts, who is Senior Specialist for Climate Finance with the Sustainable Finance Center at ICLEI Africa. I also would like to greet all the delegates. Thank you all who have been able to join us in this afternoon session. I bring you greetings from the leadership collective of the local government in South Africa. We gather today under the theme Climate Proofing the Built Environment. In the spirit of leaving no one behind, we have a duty to involve all sectors of society, including citizens of various cities and communities, in this ever-changing world that we live in today. The cooperation between governments, civil society, academia, and private sector is essential in managing the numerous challenges facing local government in general and the built environment in particular. Collaboration in managing the growing challenge of climate change is particularly critical. I would like to remind all of us that the former Secretary General of the United Nations, the late Kofi Annan, once highlighted that climate change is the single biggest challenge of our time. Honorable delegates, esteemed guests, it is evident that many developing countries are already facing climate change risks, and it is a critical constraint to inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Extreme events such as severe drought and frequent heavy rainfalls have put basic services and infrastructure under threat. Climate damages on infrastructure and economic sectors in turn strain public budgets and reduce the attractiveness for private sector investment. Local government is a critical sphere of government in terms of provision of public services, especially those that are in the built environment sector. This sphere of government is faced with a wide range of challenges, including governance, service delivery, and unemployment within communities. All these challenges are exacerbated by the natural disasters and climate change impact. As a result, local government, both urban and rural, are facing negative impact of extreme climate events, such as severe drought, heavy rainfall that causes things like desertification that is pushing many communities whose livelihoods is dependent on subsistence farming and natural resources at risk. On the one hand, and putting basic services and infrastructure under severe threat. Communities in many of these municipalities are often cut off when roads, electricity, and telecommunications infrastructure is destroyed and washed away by floods. This therefore impacts negatively on the social well-being of the people because they are not able to access food, medication, and even unable to travel to their respective places of employment. On the one hand, as frontline responders to the effects of global warming, municipalities must create sustainable development pathways for resilient communities. However, a low-carbon resilient society requires a structural change of enormous scale and speed. This requires joint action by all sectors of society and all levels of government. Coordinating these efforts and ensuring their coherence within a multi-level governance system is likely to drive forward effective, efficient, and ambitious climate action. Given the continued and increasing pressures on climate change, acting at the local level is an urgent matter. Municipalities, both rural and urban, are in the front line of climate action, but they are unable to shoulder the massive infrastructure investments and adaptation efforts required for sustainable, low to no emission and climate resilient development. This session will seek to highlight the role of local authorities in climate proofing the built environment and building resilience of the people who are interacting with it. It will also explore possible ways in which local authorities could reduce the carbon footprint on the built environment, both new and old, as well as ensuring that the infrastructure is protected. Platforms such as this are important for facilitating global dialogue and initiating collaboration between various stakeholders to find solutions to the many challenges facing the built environment. Sustainable and resilient infrastructure and sustainable development of local governments. I challenge this esteemed panel and you delegates to reflect on how best to strengthen the resilience of local authorities as a key stakeholder where the rubber hits the tar in navigating the various built environment and related climate change challenges. So I urge all relevant stakeholders here today to facilitate mechanisms to collaborate with municipalities on the exchange of knowledge, tools, and solutions towards building a resilient urban infrastructure and green building. We call on government spheres, private sector, and academia to elevate cooperation in respect of efforts to to respond to climate change mitigation and adaptation in general, and where it relates to built environment in particular. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Pakati, for setting the scene. I think it was quite an eloquent way to put into context what we're going to discuss. Now we're going to invite Honorable Andreas Volder, the Mayor of Cologne. Mayor Cologne, first of all, is part of a network of cities referred to as connective cities. I will let Mayor Volder to just talk briefly about that, what in that network are they doing. But for the purposes of this session, I would like Mayor to reflect on the experiences of Cologne on climate proofing the environment, including what is needed in order to create an enabling environment for cities and sub-regional governments in general to be able to play this role of climate proofing the built environment. And what lessons can we learn from Cologne and the network that Cologne is participating in, which is the connective cities? Can I hand over to you, Honorable Volder?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation here in the South African Pavilion and from SALGA. And I was in eThekwini 3 weeks ago because we have this connective city project of flood disaster management, and we learned that in Germany we had heavy floods 2 years ago. Rivers with a level of 40 centimeters had 8.50 meters in 8 hours. Due to heavy rainfalls, you had it in eThekwini as well. And I learned when I got to Umhlanga, I thought I could go to the beach, but it was raining all the time there. Also in the last week, you had heavy rains up to Dubai, all due to El Nino. And I think it's important that cities work together at this point. And I'm happy that now I was in with the African Union invited for the African Climate Summit in Nairobi in September, and I'm happy that now the United Emirates as well as Germany are paying money in this climate fund, because the cities, like in Africa, mostly in Africa, but also in other regions, they are not capable to recover the damages of all those impacts from climate change. So floods, fire, droughts, heat, and so on. And we have to work together, and I think let's start with the cities and change our experience we made, and look for the best practices we have, and everyone can learn. Also, Germany can learn from Africa as well. I want to invite you to learn a little bit about our city. So Cologne is the 4th largest city in Germany. It's in the western part of Germany, close to the Dutch and Belgian border. And this city is built on coal, on lignite coal. So we had the headquarters of the lignite coal company was in Cologne. The city was heated, and also the electricity come from lignite coal. We changed it 40 years ago from lignite coal to gas. That causes last winter big problems for us. Because some gas came from Russia, mostly from the Netherlands and Norway. And now it's perhaps this Russian war in Ukraine is perhaps also a booster for the transformation of energy. But now the second point is Cologne is a city was governed by the citizens since nearly 800 years. Our city was governed by the citizens. So no duke, no king has his residence in Cologne. You won't find any castle in our city because it's also a citizen-governed city, and so that is that our citizens want to be part of the local politics. And we had 3 years ago there was a petition from the citizens to get climate neutral in 2030. So 10 years when they made this petition. And they collected so many signatures that if the city council doesn't adopt this petition 100% word by word, then there will be a referendum in the city. And both sides, the city and our energy company, as well as the citizens, were afraid to lose this referendum. So we negotiated. At least the result was that in 2035 we get climate neutral for energy, heating and cooling. So not mobility, but energy. So that's at least also due to this fact, we have a green governed city council. So the Greens are the strongest party, and we are in coalition with the Christian Democrats, which are much more conservative. But at least due to the fact that we have to act now because there was a petition and there was a result of the negotiations, so we made so many things like a climate action plan. We have for the windmills concentration zones. We put so many money in PV. I learned now from South Africa that PV is also very very much needed because you have this lack of energy, and then for 2 hours then you change with your PV. That's another motivation. But we, in order to manage it, we need every year from this 1 million inhabitant city, 11,000 roofs with the new PV. So and also our citizens then have to invest. So and we support it also with some programs. So there are programs from the country, from the state, also from the republic, from the state. And also Cologne puts money in due to this fact. And we have also a lot of industry, and we have one lignite coal power plant in our city, and we will close it in 7 years, and we will be replaced by big heat pumps from who generated the temperature from our river Rhine, which is a big river in western part of Germany, and to transform into energy as well. So we learned 2 years ago, and I think it's very important. We had these disasters. We had heat, but we had the floods. I told you before, by example, in our city, 60,000 houses were affected by this flood. But in the surroundings, where smaller rivers are, it was a real big disasters. By example, the house of my mother. It was affected, and the damage is not. It need 2 years that someone came to restore this the damages because she could live in the house, but at least it needs 2 years to go in the cellar and to renovate all the things, and a lot of people are not back in their houses 2 years after this damage, and I think it's also. I think the people learn much more from these disasters than from global warming or from reducing greenhouse gas emissions or the higher temperatures we have. Because they see now the impact, what's happening with climate change, and that's a reason we have to act, and that I think it's a lesson that people learned. And and one last point perhaps. you have to involve the citizens. In Cologne, it's much more that our citizens want to involve the administration or the politicians. They are very progressive in a city with a university, with a strong media industry, so they are very, very progressive. And we have to, to work with them together. So we had these negotiations. At least there is a result. It's a hard way to get climate neutral now in 12 years, but I think it's worth it. And it had been very hard negotiation, but at least there is a result, and it is accepted by the population. And yeah, that's my message to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mayor. Thank you very much, Honorable Mayor. We are now. Oh, my computer is dead. We are now going to invite the city of eThekwini. I think the context in terms of the city of eThekwini is that in the last 4 or 5 years, they have had incidences that set the context for this discussion. We particularly invited the city of eThekwini to share because of that. The first one, which all of us experienced, is the COVID-19 that led to shutdown of socio-economic activity across the world and, of course, in South Africa, which impacted all cities. As the city was recovering to that, we then had a huge socio-political uprising, which was not in the control of the city of eThekwini, but impacted eThekwini significantly. And as they were recovering from that, because that uprising impacted economic infrastructure and economic activity in a very big way. Now, as that city was recovering from that, then they had deadly, massive floods that I think, at least in my life, I'm quite old, I had never seen before. I had never seen floods that could move the kind of structures that it was moving in eThekwini, you know, containers of ships floating in water all over. It was massive. It destroyed a lot of infrastructure. Now they are dealing with that. We thought we should invite eThekwini to share with us all of these, particularly the floods. What have they meant in terms of just making the city look at the issue of climate proofing the built environment? Because they were in a state of vulnerability as the floods came, which are related to climate change. What has it meant? And if they can share the experiences, their experiences in terms of dealing with all of that and how they are doing it going forward. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Kolisa. We really appreciate this platform to be able to share our experiences. And special greetings to the Honorable Mayor of Cologne. Very familiar with Bremen as our sister city. So Germany is my second home. And to the Deputy Minister here of COCTA, and thank you, sir, for joining us. Mr. Kolisa, you've painted our context quite well. And I would like to also add to that the issue of energy insecurity in South Africa and how this is so negatively impacting the ability of cities to continue to be able to provide services, service delivery and economic development. There can be no, proper service delivery if the economy is not growing. Load shedding has done that for us, has killed us as a city such that our revenues that we collecting now are so reduced. So with the many challenges that we have faced over the past 5 to 7 years, you can see that we are a city that has been in a constant state of recovery. But that said, we have not been, sitting on the sidelines of the climate change fight. We have always been at the forefront of climate action. As I'm speaking today, we are on our third generation climate change strategy with an integrated implementation plan that we are also subjecting to a rigorous monitoring and evaluation so that we are very transparent out there in terms of how we are doing with climate action. So climate change is part of mainstream decision making in the city of Durban. 2019, we were the very first city to complete and adopt a Paris Agreement compliant climate action plan, and we were very clear in terms of the targets that we were setting to meet in the medium to long term. We had 2030 targets across, various thematic areas, with 2050 being the ultimate goal for us in terms of becoming net zero carbon. So we started through political will to want to advance towards a low carbon development pathway. But I will go back to the issue of the economy. As cities, we are there for service delivery. And economic development is a big part of that. We need to set the scene, create an enabling environment for the economy to grow. It has been very difficult over the past years because of the challenges that we have faced. But where I would like to perhaps share details with you, where we are right now, okay, starting with the 2022 floods. We are very traumatized, many of us are working in the climate change space, because we did a thorough risk and vulnerability analysis of our own city so that we understand what our vulnerability is in the different, projections, under different projections of, global warming. And we thought we knew this very well. But what happened in 2022? It's nothing that we expected. So when we were doing our modeling and our climate change response based on the modeling that we did, clearly that was not enough, because if you can't measure it, if you did not predict it, then you can't have a response for it. But that said, the city, as we speak, is functional right now, even though we lost about 40% of our infrastructure. So if we're talking about the built environment, the engineering infrastructure, roads, water and wastewater infrastructure, electricity infrastructure, we lost quite a lot of those. And there was a lot of talk around Durban being exempt from load shedding for a while. And it caused a lot of talking around South Africa, but that was not the truth. We lost a lot of megawatts already, so there was nothing to shed. So that was our agreement with Eskom, that if you're saying you're subjecting us to this stage of load shedding, you want us to give so much back to the grid, but we don't have that. We lost it all during that disaster. But we, understanding our role as a city to provide service delivery and ensure that we keep businesses within the city, have been pushing now to make sure that building back now, this infrastructure, replacing it, firstly, we have to review our budgets. While there is a lot of talk about budgets that came from the National Disaster Fund and how we did not spend it and all that, we were not depending on that, really, as a city. We knew we needed to provide services. And that budget came much later, but there was work that needed to be done. Businesses needed to come back online and continue to run so that we don't lose out anymore on our ability to collect revenues. So at where we are right now, we are praying, okay, we had a tornado around July. set us back again, but we're getting used to this issue. Even though we have this setback after setback, we understand very well the fact that when we replace what we lost, it has to be done in a climate resilient way. And in this regard, our engineers are fully on board in terms of the replacement of roads and stormwater infrastructure, that if you had a certain diameter of pipe or bridge at the time, because you thought your one in a 50-year flood line was here, you understand that that has changed. And this has to be advised by science and the projections that science that is coming from the IPCC as well. So I can say that in terms of climate change adaptation, we are using up that opportunity of being in the space of needing to rebuild, to build back better where it is possible. But in some cases, this is not possible because you need to plug that gap now. If sewer is spewing into the river now, you can't say that I need to be like innovative and whatever. You need to do something now while you are thinking about the long-term plan. That was just the climate change resilience element of it, just looking at the infrastructure service delivery by the city. But there is an element that we should not forget: our citizens. I've talked about businesses and how we have been trying to ensure they don't leave the city, and dealing with our own vulnerable areas in terms of areas that are vulnerable to flooding and so on and so forth. But there are businesses that were not insured or insurable for that kind of event. They are lost to the city forever. And there are private homes that you thought you had a bond, you have insurance, you lose your home, insurance does not pay. What happens to you? And this is why we have submitted a paper to the UNFCCC on loss and damage, because I think our case as a Tekwini needed to be told, because in that paper we also include the issue of informal businesses, SMMEs. So these are businesses like, child minding services, businesses like, mamas selling various stuff, fruits and vegetables, along, the city center, and they've lost everything. And we have done our best as a city. I think we've spent around, it's close to 110 million to try and revive those businesses and assist those businesses. For me, that is a loss and damage. It's not something that the city should have shouldered. That is a discussion that needs to go into the loss and damage discussion when we think about how that fund is going to be used, how it is going to be, put together, and ensuring that cities have direct access to it. We need to think about these things. And Mr. Kolisa, lastly, we are a city that understands our own carbon footprint very well. And this is made very clear in our climate action plan. We know that we have services as a city that actually emit a lot of carbon. We do our own greenhouse gas emission inventory as a city. We only contribute 6% towards the total greenhouse gases emitted by the city of Durban. But we are taking the opportunity for a just transition to be able to then deal with the emissions from our sewerage treatment works and try and reuse the sludge, produce electricity. We have started the landfill gas to electricity in terms of dealing with the issue of methane and diverting food waste from landfill sites, so that not so much waste goes into the landfill site, because most of the carbon footprint in the solid waste element of our service delivery is actually coming from the transportation element. And so in buildings now, we are already part of the program of the Department of Energy, wherein we know that legislation requires that our public buildings need to display energy performance certificates. And in terms of the category that you are as a building, you will be monitored in terms of continuous improvement. So we are using funds that we get through the Energy Efficiency Demand Side Management Program to retrofit certain installations within buildings to make them more energy efficient, and as well as put in new installations that will then assist us in reducing energy consumption. And lastly, we are then big on the issue of addressing load shedding within the city, not just for, I mean, the earlier panel was talking about, approaching transition not just because it's about renewables, but also because it is an opportunity to also grow the economy. So we are in the middle of our independent power producer program, looking to procure about 400 megawatts from alternative sources of electricity. And we're hoping that this will alleviate at least stage 4 of load shedding to not affect the city of Durban. And this is also in part of a basket of tools that we have already in place, working with other structures within the city, other big businesses that are already self-generating. We have something in place to make sure that when you self-generate and you are still part of the grid, we want you to be part of the grid. So whatever you produce that is extra, you bring back to the grid, and you get a certain rebate out of it, because our wheeling tariffs have not been concluded yet. But there's quite a bit that we are doing to get more, energy from other resources to be part of the grid, so that we can then share this demand. I mean, where there's no demand, they put back, and we can give to where there is demand. So that is just a summary, high-level summary of eThekwini and how we have been dealing with the issue of climate proofing.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tiangwa. Thank you very much. Ryan, you have had the experiences of at least 2 cities that are working on climate proofing the built environment, both from the point of view of mitigation and the point of view of adaptation. Can you please share with us the work being done by ICLEI or generally the local government authorities or the LGMA secretariat in terms of trying to position cities in all what is happening in the world, the negotiations and so on and so on, to position cities to be in a position to do this climate proofing of socio-economic development and built environment in the context of climate change? Can you please share?
Sure. I think firstly, thanks so much for having me on this panel. Got a very distinguished panel here and distinguished guests. I just want to echo a sentence that you said in your opening remarks, and that it was, the success of the NDCs across the globe really depend on implementation at the local level. And a big part of our work is trying to project the voice of local government. And it's great to see that it's now finally, making its way on the international stage. And I think we're starting to see more and more people pay more attention to subnational governments and the importance they play at combating climate change. Within ICLEI Africa, I think our role is maybe threefold. The first is helping cities plan correctly. So we host the Covenant of Mayors of Sub-Saharan Africa, where we provide technical support to all our signatories and helping them develop a sustainable energy and climate adaptation plan. So this plan is very thorough. It looks at all the different sectors within the cities and helps them come up with strategies and the way forward. African cities are growing fast. I think some of the numbers are the African population within cities will triple by 2050, which is huge. We also know that 70% of emissions come from cities. So it's important that these new developments follow, green pathways, low carbon pathways. And it's important for cities to plan for this. The second point, and I think this has been, a strong voice coming from cities is, yes, we have these plans and they're great, but we still need help implementing these plans. So within ICLEI Africa, we recently launched the Sustainable Finance Center, and it's a big part of my work to extract projects from these sustainable energy and climate adaptation plans and help these projects through the project development lifecycle. I think early stage project development is still really, really needed across the continent. Taking a project from the idea stage to pre-feasibility stage and helping link them to development finance institutions is a big part of our work. And we really have to play this, it's a bit of an unspoken knowledge broker role of bringing in the private sector, bringing in developers, bringing in the municipality, and making sure that everyone is pulling in the right direction. I think we've had some great success with a program we called AFMEG, Alternative Finance for Municipal Embedded Generation, which we did in partnership with the DBSA. And there, ICLEI Africa helped 4 intermediary cities, 2 in KZN, 1 in the Eastern Cape, and 1 in Western Cape, really get from this idea stage to the pre-feasibility stage, which we're almost terming this little valley of death, where a lot of city projects become stuck. And there is not a lot of resources going towards this stage. In doing so, we help them enter DBSA's project preparation facility, and hopefully they're on their way to access DBSA's embedded generation investment program. And these will be the first intermediary cities of their kind to hopefully do so. Another important project that we're working on is within Kwadakuza, so your neighbor of eThekwini. And even though there were those really horrendous floods in eThekwini, I think there's a lot of innovation, and your transformative river management program is really being used as a blueprint across the country. So likewise, we're helping Kwadakuza develop their own transformative river management program. Help clear alien invasives out of their rivers, help develop adequate stormwater infrastructure, help develop urban developments away from floodlines. So that is a big part of the work that we are doing. And then I think finally, and this work is often underappreciated, but it seems to be really strong with Cologne and eThekwini, is this peer-to-peer exchange and networking within cities. To pinch a quote from our hometown, I think they say, "Ndlela ibuzwa kwaba phambili." You must learn from those who have gone before. And there's pockets of innovation across African cities, and it's important for us to connect, the African cities with one another so that we can learn, and we can also showcase this innovation across the globe. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ryan. We now are going to give an opportunity to everyone in the room who would like to ask questions, make comments on these elements, 3 elements that we have been discussing so far through the panel in terms of climate proofing, built environment, local authorities, the interaction of these elements to result in better socio-economic development in the context of climate change. Anyone who would like to make a comment, who would like to ask a question? There's 1 hand for now. 2. Can we take those 2?
Thank you. Alicia from Amnesty International, and thank you for a really interesting conversation. I wanted to ask what lessons have been learned from the KZN flood, when it comes to access to adequate housing. We know that a lot of the people that were affected did live in or did live in a township setting, and the housing isn't great, and makes them very vulnerable to these extreme weather events. So yeah, I wanted to find out what's happening there. Are they rebuilding in that same area? And if so, what materials are they building with? Or if they're being relocated, to which areas are they being relocated? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I just want to check with the Honorable Mayor. I do understand you explained a little bit about the memorandum that was signed by the citizens. Oh, okay. Yeah, let me use a shop steward voice. No, look, explain the issue of the memorandum that was signed by the citizens that is talking about being climate neutral by a certain time. I just want to check, before that memorandum was signed, what were the timelines that you were having to work on climate proofing?
Thank you. Any other hand, or we can go back to the panel to respond? Yes.
Just to give it context, so that we may as well learn as South Africa how much time we need, because right now it looks like we are hamstrung. Everybody is pushing that it must be done now, as if we are fixing it mid-air. So maybe that is the context of my question. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought your hand was up. Wanted to comment? Okay. Let's go back then to the panel. I want to add to the questions that have been raised, particularly eThekwini, Ms. Tengwa. What I want to understand, in my intro, I said, when we talk about local authorities, in the hierarchy of the structure of government, they are lowest in terms of authority and resources, but they are highest in terms of proximity to the communities that require to be led out of crisis that comes from climate change related events. I want us to explore this in the context of eThekwini, as you were trying to rebuild better where you can, just recover where you couldn't. Are there any experiences you can share in respect of the authority you needed and the authority you had that would help you as a city to rebuild? Oh, thank you very much. So in addition to that question, can you explore this with us? And Cologne, Mayor, if maybe you can share the part that I wanted also you to cover in your earlier input, in the case of Cologne, is what do you think it enables you as Cologne to be able to implement, for example, the plans that you've developed in collaboration with your citizens? What enables you to move in the way that you are moving, that you would want to share with everyone as an enabler of your work? Can we maybe take a discussion in relation to those 4 questions? Because there's 2 questions here. I've added 1 question on each in terms of the cities. Please go ahead. We'll start with this time with eThekwini.
Thank you. So, with regards to the issue of vulnerability of homes, we cannot deal with this issue without looking at the historical context and where we are coming from as a country with our apartheid spatial planning. So our plan and our action and approach to dealing with the issues that we faced on the ground. Firstly, we understand that eThekwini has many, we know how many informal settlements we have. We know how many of those are vulnerable. The mapping was done as part of the risk and vulnerability analysis, and we have a plan of action to eradicate informal settlements and move people out of areas that are vulnerable, because those people are settling there without any, approval from the city. But you don't just chuck them out. So there is a plan, but this plan is linked to the provision of housing, which has been a moving target for a very long time. So I want to make that differentiation. So for this group that is in informal settlements that was affected and had their structures washed away, we had a different approach there. They were moved to halls, which was not good. However, the lesson there is that as a city, we need to plan for climate change, migration, and internal displacement, which is work that we're now busy with, using the data we collected from the 2022 floods, understanding the needs of the internally displaced people. So we need a consolidated approach in terms of planning for it, knowing that it is something that can hit us at any time, over and above the homelessness that we know about. That is one of the lessons that we learned. Secondly, okay, as a city, things that are within our authority to do is, giving approvals for people to be able to rebuild. So with the people that had formal structures, even there, two categories there. There were people with formal structures approved by the city that were not even in vulnerable areas, but still, those structures were washed away. Obviously, those people will go to their banks and insurance and get funds to rebuild. However, as a city, we waived the need for them to then apply for, submit building plans and pay the price that is associated with that process, based on whether the house had a valid approved building plan to begin with. In that situation, the decision on whether to rebuild in the very same area is for the person, lies with the person and the bank, because the bank is not going to allow you to. Once they've paid you, they're not going to allow you to, build in the same place where you are vulnerable. So that was another group. And then there's another group that they just had those houses not funded by the bank, no building plans, nothing whatsoever. With the rebuilding, the city did give some assistance with building materials. However, those people needed to apply for building plan approval so that we can then begin to assess the issues of vulnerability and the need for the city perhaps to assist with climate proofing, whether it's through hard, engineered services and so on and so forth. So that's how we responded to this, and there were clearly lessons that we learned as a city, and on top of the fact that some of these things we knew about, it's just that our implementation of the plans that we have has been very slow for a number of reasons. And Mr. Khwelisa, with regards to the issue of authority, I tend to take a different take in terms of, the hierarchy and the spheres of government. Okay, we are a sphere of government, not a level of government. I don't see us as being at the bottom, but we clearly understand our responsibility, that our responsibility is to the people that we serve. Those people are not going to go to national when they have an issue. Mr. Madlala here, my leader here, always makes an example of how we battled to deal with the fact that people lost entire families. Maybe you are the only family member left and your people are dead, they're looking to the municipality to assist with burials. The municipality has no mechanism like that. National is not coming to the party, understanding that national government is responsible for declaring the area as a disaster zone. And what does that mean then for implementation by cities in terms of assisting the people that we have on the ground? So we had to rely on your Motsepe Foundation to deal with certain things that were starting to come up, things that were outside the ambit and understood for cities in terms of constitutional mandate for provision of service delivery. So certainly the floods did raise a number of areas that were no man's land because they were not a responsibility of cities to deal with, and nobody was jumping into the space to say that, okay, this is my responsibility, I'm going to deal with it. But what is important for us is that we collect, we need to collect data so that we analyze and plan better for the future if we deal with this situation again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tiangwa. Mayor, over to you.
Yes, first to your question.
Yes.
You have to understand, Germany is a federal republic. And so the local level is responsible nearly for everything, not for external affairs, not for the army, not for law and justice, but everything is, we are responsible. So we also get from our taxes of income, or by example VAT taxes, there is a percentage which goes directly to the cities. So that's our system, and it's built on subsidiarity. So first help yourself, and if you need support, the city supports you with the taxes and with the programs we have. And what we have in our cities, and especially in Cologne, we have a lot of companies. So we have a mobility company who's for the trams and for the buses, but we have also a company for energy. 3,000 workers are in this company, so you can see it's a big one. It's the second biggest we have in Germany. So we have a direct impact of what this company is doing. And what we are doing, by example, for climate change, we own a power plant in Rostock. That's at the Baltic Sea. And it produces energy by coal. And this coal came from Russia. We don't receive any energy from Russia anymore. So now we try to change it to a hydrogen power plant with offshore windmills in the Baltic Sea. That are things that we as city are doing. To your question, so the plan was to get climate neutral for energy in 2045. Now we are 10 years earlier, and we will manage it with we would like to manage it with a decentral and diverse structure of power plants. This is the development you have also in South Africa, because everyone puts now PV on his roof to avoid this lack of energy for those 2 hours between 6 p.m. and 12 p.m. I saw this, and I was also affected. I was in the mall, and suddenly, boop, shut down at 6 o'clock. All shops were closed. It's also an economical question for your traders and so on. And the third thing I would like to react on the question with the flood. You said 40% of your infrastructure was destroyed. And the question is, how do we replace and where do we replace the infrastructure? So for the cities, a little bit outside of Cologne, where there's some cities, 100% of the infrastructure were damaged. No school, no kindergarten, no supermarket, no all the vehicles for technical support of the city, for waste collection and so on, damaged, 100%. So rebuild it now in other places, and safe places. I think that's very much. So we have to withdraw from the rivers. The problems and that lessons we didn't learn, or the people didn't learn, who are the owners of the buildings or of these properties. They had rebuilt their buildings at the same place, most of them. And that's a big problem. I learned it also from eThekwini, that also the people at the settlements who were settling at the rivers, they want to return also to those places. And I think that's very important to make programs for the people. In Germany, it's also a question of insurance, because the insurance pays only to rebuild the same building at the same place. And if you build a new one in another place, the insurance said, that's not my duty. So also we have to change a little bit the laws, but we also need funds and not loans. I think it's also very important in this thing. And last number, around Cologne, this flood cost 30 billion euros. It was the second biggest damage we had in the world after a hurricane in the United States. And this climate fund is 100 billion euros a year. Perhaps a year, I don't know. You can see how small this fund is when you see all those disasters around the world and how big the challenge is. And our government said we can pay this once. If there's a next disaster, we can't invest 30 billion euros to help the people to recover their buildings or the infrastructure. So we see how big the challenge is for everyone, and so we have to learn from each other, and we have to work together. And regarding from Europe to Africa, I learned it's very complicated, the situation, due to colonialism, and now Russia and China is very active. But I think that we, on a local level, with a good governance, we can work together and learn from each other. And you made a lot of bad experience, but you have also some good solutions. And we need also this solution in Europe. So thank you.
Yeah. Before we come to a closing, can I find out if there are any other questions or comments before I ask the other members of the panel to also round up? There's 1 and 2. Okay. You can go ahead. The mic.
Thanks, everyone. My name is Bhavna Dunaran. I'm from the NBI, actually, and I'm a resident of eThekwini municipality. So when I left eThekwini, I moved actually to the North Rhine when the flood hit, and I was in the North Rhine when the flood hit in Durban. So I was back in Germany when it was flooding there, and my family was back in Durban when it was flooding in Durban. So I saw on the opposite sides of the world, the same thing was happening. I just want to find out what and how do we use adaptation as a climate proofing, and the speed in which we can adapt and build infrastructure that can adapt to these floods, because they're coming, right? And every year, I saw with eThekwini, it's just getting worse and worse year on year. And I was my hometown is in a region where informal settlements are building back on the same flood banks year on year after these floods happen. So I guess my question is the role of adaptation and how fast we can actually improve infrastructure, because the citizens of that settlement, they don't move from there. It's close to their places of work. They can't actually afford to move to further locations and then pay a lot of money to travel to come back to their employment. So just trying to understand what type of solutions can be put in place, and are there solutions for those that have nowhere else to go because the cost of transport, for example, is too expensive. Yeah, my question is on adaptation and how fast can we actually adapt, because it's happening quite frequently. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
No, thank you very much. Is it on? Oh, thank you. Toivo from South Africa. My question is to the mayor. Now that the central government has said they're not going to give you funds for another disaster, so what interventions or mechanisms did you put in place? Does your municipality or local authority budget for integrated the budgeting in the framework, or is it, what solution now that you've received direction? I'm just trying to figure out how you're going to go about, because disasters will always happen. And you've heard from the Tegwini example, they had planned and did predictions, but when the floods hit us, it was quite we had a different experience from what we had planned for. Thankful.
Thank you. Before we come back to the two cities, questions have been directed at the two cities, I really would like to appreciate that our leaders also from South Africa in the Parliament of South Africa, in particular the Chief Whip of the ruling party in South Africa, Honorable Machodina, also joined us here. Thank you very much for joining us. Those were the questions. Yeah, let's start with you again.
Oh, my apologies. So, with regards to the issue of adaptation, we know that we can't adapt our way out of everything. So, we use adaptation in the context of eThekwini by first focusing on our natural environment. We are big on ecosystem-based adaptation. Ryan here mentioned our transformative riverine management plan. That is an ecosystem-based adaptation approach to dealing with the vulnerability of water sources that leads to the failure of stormwater management infrastructure. So we managed for, quite a while back to convince our engineers to think differently, that don't just engineer yourself out of everything. If you take care of the water courses, then your infrastructure will not be undermined every time there is a flood. And by doing so, investing in the natural environment, that is a nature-based solutions approach that is very cost effective, dealing with multiple challenges. You're improving the environment, you are employing people from local communities to take care of these rivers, and you are protecting your engineering infrastructure. So we made a case for them to divert some of the money that they were budgeting for the maintenance of their stormwater infrastructure to then go into the investment in ecological infrastructure. So we're talking about avoided costs now. However, the adaptation approach doesn't work everywhere. You also need to decide to retreat. We did a sea level rise in our situation. Modeling, we know that there are certain settlements that are situated where they are very vulnerable to sea level rise. And as a city, we then, employ a number of things, ecosystem-based adaptation, where you then plant the dunes to protect infrastructure, but in some areas, that is not even possible. Even if you have a hotel there or anything there, they need to make a decision to then move out of that space. Retreat, you can't be throwing more money into the place that is going to be washed away. That then takes us back to the issue of the informal settlements. If you have moved people out of that area, what we have seen is that they will come, not these people, maybe not the same people will come back, but that area will be occupied again. So we are working to make sure that you repurpose the area immediately. You have a plan to repurpose the area before you even move the people, so that you don't get a situation of somebody else moving in there. And once someone has been moved out of that area and you build a house for them, you're not responsible for them anymore if they decide to put themselves in a vulnerable situation. I'd like to talk about something that you actually spoke of in detail, the issue of what is going to be needed by people when they're internally displaced. You need to consider where you're moving them to in terms of proximity to their places of work and proximity to where their children go to for schools. So the issue of internal displacement is the one that then requires an integrated approach, not just by the municipality. You need the Department of Education, you need the Department of Social Development, and the department that is responsible for, employment of people. And to say that if you cannot afford to get to your area of employment because we have moved you elsewhere, what else can be considered to then top up and deal with that situation? So in terms of how fast can we adapt, I'm not able to say exactly how fast, but the one thing that we know, where we can never go wrong, ecosystem-based adaptation, we need to implement that aggressively. And within the next 5 years, we would be done with that. And that reduces our vulnerability a great deal. But everything else, I can't really say, how fast we can do it in order to not be vulnerable anymore. My sense is that we will always be vulnerable.
Thank you. Mayor, there's no more money.
Yes, there is no more money, but I talked about subsidiarity. So the people now know where the water could be. And we asked them also to make an insurance, which is quite expensive because the insurance says, yes, you are settling in this flood zone, so you have to pay more. Perhaps we have to change our insurance law that it's mandatory for everyone to make this insurance. It makes it a little bit cheaper for the people who are more affected. But one point what we need is so the people couldn't imagine what happened in this night. Because the police came and said, please go up the hills. But it went to the river and said, oh, minimum 4 or 5 meters missing to my house of level. So I go in my cellar and put the things from the bottom, perhaps on the board, and at least the water came quicker than they thought. And and that thing, we need effective warning systems. So we had them in Germany, and I think you don't have them in Africa. I don't know, but we have to warn the people. 300 people died in this night. So I have a lot of friends, me not, but who saw people dying in the floods. 3,000 people of 20,000 in one small city used for long-term psychological counseling. That's a high number. Yes. Then in Cologne, in the city with the Rhine, there's a big river. It rises slowly and goes down slowly. So we know what's the level of the river could be in 3 days. So we can warn the people in the city, not at the small rivers, but in the big ones. And we made technical solutions, very expensive. But it only works until a level of 13 meters. The biggest flood we had was 10 meters 69. But if there is more than 30 meters level, more than 150,000 people are affected. And we know in Cologne, in every street, where on which level, we can say it for each 10 centimeters, how the water level is in this street in order to evacuate or to warn the people. So I think it's also very important for this adaptation that we have a warning system. And what we also think it's also very important not to make big drainages. It's also important, but I think storage of water is a big issue, especially in Africa. So sponge cities. So So trees and can storage also water. So we also need greener cities for due to the heat we had. So it's not only technical solutions. I think we need also this nature-based solutions in our city. Yeah, to protect our citizens from the from the impact of this climate change issues. It's not only the floods; it's also the heat and the drought. Thank you.
Councillor Pagati, what would be your, in short, what you can say is your take home?
We can learn one or two things from the Germans, but the difference is that the political system is different. Germany is a federal republic. South Africa is a unitary. Oh, thanks. We can learn one or two things from the Germans, but the difference is the political system there. Germany is a federal republic and we are a unitary state, and the systems are not the same. Now, what we can do better is to have a coordinated approach to disaster management that relates to climate change, because municipalities on their own are not coping with disasters, as we have seen it in various areas in our country, in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Eastern Cape, and elsewhere. That necessitates a more coordination, but also bringing all the other three spheres of government working together. We can deal at the municipal level with the adaptation and other related activities. That includes conscientization of the communities, particularly those who build in the river banks and who become the first targets when there are floods. That responsibility is the responsibility of the municipality. But post-disaster, it then becomes a big effort for municipalities to relocate people to other areas, but also taking into account what has been said here and the role of the banks, the banking sector, and the security sector, insurance, must be brought into the party so that they become part of the solution-seeking process. The point that was made by Andreas that sometimes banks are refused when you relocate people to other areas because the properties that they have mortgaged are in that area. And yet we all know that the area is disaster prone and people need to be removed. So they've got to be part of this conversation so that we can get sense of what would their contribution be. That includes the insurance. Thank you.
Having heard of all of this, what is your take home?
I think my message is we've probably talked about a lot of issues today on the panel, and I think it's right that we do bring these issues to the fore. But I would just like to say that, you know, my panelists often the unsung heroes working in municipalities. It's often a thankless job. Keep pushing, keep driving for more and more improvement within your cities. There is a lot of innovation out there, and I think we are making progress. So my takeaway would just, you know, keep being resilient yourselves, and I think we will be able to develop the cities that we want, the economic and bright, prosperous cities that, you know, we want within Africa and the globe.
Thank you. I didn't want to abuse the hospitality of the Department of Forest and Fisheries and Environment as well as NPI, but I'm really tempted to give Honorable Mayor the last word here because I can see you are itching. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I want to add something what you said. You said we are not a federal republic. The city of Cologne, we have a lot of mandatory tasks. So like health, schooling, things like this, infrastructure. But climate change issue are up today. It's a voluntary task, so we can do it or not. And we also applied to our state government that climate change issues is a mandatory task, and then if it's mandatory, then also the state have to give funds to the cities in order to, or in the administration to for the people who are working for these issues. It's also very important that you have also your staff. You can manage those things, and we are fighting for this as well. So it's mandatory. Cologne is not the poorest city in Germany, so we can do a lot of things by ourselves. But we have a lot of poor cities in Germany and regions, and they can't act in those climate change issues as perhaps we do it. And that's our struggles as city to apply for more funds again for the struggle against this adaptation things. And that's also that's the same problem we have.
Yes, Susan?
In my closing, I would also like to point out one important thing for me, that I feel it is not fair for the city ratepayers. From everything that we have talked about, I mean, the losses and damages that have been suffered from by the city, from losing our infrastructure, from individual properties being destroyed, from the city having to set up transition centers to house people that have been displaced. That is an additional cost that should not be shouldered by the ratepayers, because right now the city has no choice but to continue increasing rates, and that is not right. So what needs to happen is that at national government, and as part of the negotiation space, we push really hard for loss and damage, but also this issue of interacting with the insurance industry, that needs to, be tackled at the level of national government and not left to each individual city to deal with. Otherwise, it will never be effective. Thank you.
Thank you. We have run out of the time that we were given for this session. Thank you so much from the members of the panel who have joined us. I think there are some very important issues that have come out of this discussion. One, for me, that stands out is the issue of loss and damage in relation to local authorities. I think it stands out that as the negotiations are happening, as the agreements are being finalized on at least the matter of loss and damage, getting those to filter into local authorities where the real issues are is quite important. Having systems in our countries of ensuring that we are able to get this international loss and damage funding into the municipalities is one of them. The second one that stands out for me, so I hope, Ryan, you are hearing us in terms of the local government authorities are together in the space. The second one is learning from each other. The examples of Cologne, examples of eThekwini, of the things that we could not have imagined before now happening. We need to learn in terms of how do we get prepared for this now, because they are likely to happen to all of us. Is quite important. So sessions such as this, networking, getting more from each other, cross-pollinating is going to be very important. The third one for me that came out is also the programs, very helpful programs that ICLEI Africa is implementing particularly in Southern Africa and in South Africa, that we may want to source, take more from those programs in order to improve our ability to climate-proof our socio-economic development and the built environment. With those few that I have taken, because quite a number of them that have come up, and I don't think we have any more time to discuss now, I would really like to thank you for making time to be with us in this session. Thank you very much.